My name is Alex. I'm 22, but some days I feel 100. My hair used to be a mess of light brown, always falling into my eyes, but now it's just flat. The kind of flat you get when you haven't truly slept in weeks, maybe months. I used to laugh easy, the kind of loud, genuine laugh that echoed in my chest. Now, even a smile feels like a betrayal, a lie I can't quite pull off. This isn't some dramatic overstatement for effect. This is just what's left of me. It all started last summer. I remember the exact day, July 14th. Not because anything immediately happened, but because it was the last truly normal day I had. The sun was out, bright and relentless, baking the asphalt on our quiet suburban street. My folks were away, visiting my aunt in Arizona, which meant the house was mine. Freedom, right? Usually it was, but that particular summer, it felt less like freedom and more like an echo chamber. Our house, a two-story colonial with chipped white paint and a surprisingly well-maintained garden, suddenly felt big. Too big for one person. I spent most of my time in my room, curtains drawn against the oppressive heat, playing video games or just scrolling through my phone, half-heartedly replying to texts. It was the epitome of a lazy summer, boring in the best possible way. Until the sound started. At first, I told myself it was the house settling. Old houses make noises, everyone knows that. Creaks, groans, the gentle shift of wood expanding and contracting. But these weren't gentle. These were purposeful. It began subtly, a faint scratching sound from behind the wall in my closet. I ignored it for a couple of days. Probably mice, I reasoned. We lived near a small wooded area. It wasn't out of the question. I even mentioned it to my mom on the phone, trying to sound casual, like it was a minor annoyance. She just told me to put out some traps, bless her heart. She had no idea. The scratching grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't a scurrying sound anymore. It was rhythmic. Like claws, sure, but almost like something was trying to dig through. I'd press my ear against the drywall, heart hammering, trying to decipher it. Sometimes it would stop the second I got close, leaving me standing there in the suffocating quiet, feeling stupid. Other times, it would continue, a relentless, grating noise that made my teeth ache. Then came the tapping. This was different. It wasn't inside the walls. It came from the windows. At night. My room is on the second floor, facing the backyard. There's a sturdy old oak tree just outside, its branches reaching close, but not quite touching the glass. I know this because I've spent countless hours staring out that window, especially in the dead of night when sleep refused to come. The first time I heard it, I jolted upright in bed, my blood going cold. Tap, tap. Soft, almost hesitant, but undeniably there. It wasn't the wind. There was no storm, no breeze strong enough to make a branch hit the window like that. I lay there, frozen, listening. Tap, tap. It stopped. I convinced myself it was a dream, a lingering echo from something I'd watched online. I tried to dismiss it, to rationalize it away. But the next night, it started again. And the night after that. It always came around the same time, between 2 and 3 in the morning. That hour when the world feels most asleep, most vulnerable. The darkness outside my window wasn't just dark. It was a living, breathing entity. I'd pull my blinds tight, convinced that if I couldn't see out, whatever was making the noise couldn't see in. A childish thought, I knew, but fear doesn't care much for logic. One night, the tapping escalated. It wasn't just a gentle tap anymore. It was a more forceful, deliberate thump, 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 as if something heavy, something with mass was hitting the glass. My entire body tensed, every muscle locked. I could feel my pulse throbbing in my ears, drowning out everything else. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing it to stop, willing myself back to sleep, back to reality. When I finally dared to open them, the room was still dark, the silence absolute. But something had changed. The air felt heavy, charged. And then I smelled it. a faint, cloying scent, like damp earth mixed with something else. Something indescribably foul, almost metallic. It was faint, barely there, but it was enough to make my stomach churn. It was coming from outside, seeping in through the cracks around the window frame. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, every nerve ending screaming. The fear wasn't a sudden jolt anymore. It was a constant, low hum vibrating through my bones. I didn't know what it was, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that whatever was out there, it wasn't just some animal. And it wanted to get in. The mornings became a perverse kind of relief. The light, even if it was filtered through my drawn blinds, felt like a shield. I'd rush to pull them open, half expecting to see claw marks on the glass, or worse, some grotesque smear. But there was never anything, just the ordinary bright window, the familiar oak tree, and the quiet backyard. It was almost more unnerving, this complete lack of physical evidence. It made me question myself, question my sanity. Was I imagining it? Was the isolation just getting to me? My parents called every other day, and I'd force a cheerful tone, making up stories about what I'd done, about how little I missed them. The truth was, I desperately wanted them home, wanted the familiar noise and comfort of their presence to drown out the silence that now felt so menacing. I started barricading my door at night, not with furniture, but with stupid things, like a stack of books or a laundry basket. Anything that would make a noise if the door opened. As if that would actually stop anything. It was a pathetic attempt at control, a child's defense against an unseen monster. The smell, though, that was harder to ignore, harder to rationalize away. It wasn't always there, but sometimes, usually after a night of particularly aggressive tapping, I'd catch a faint whiff of it in my room, even with the windows sealed shut. That damp earth, that metallic tang, like old blood mixed with something rotten and sweet. It clung to the air, a silent, invisible declaration that whatever was out there, it had been close. Too close. One afternoon, I decided I'd had enough. I was tired of being a prisoner in my own room. I needed to see if there was anything outside, anything at all. I grabbed the old, heavy-duty flashlight my dad kept in the kitchen drawer. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it. I walked through the living room, trying to project an air of normalcy. Every shadow seemed to stretch and twist. Every creak of the floorboards sounded amplified. I tried to remind myself it was broad daylight, that nothing could happen. But the dread was a living thing in my gut. I unlocked the back door, the click echoing far too loudly in the quiet house. Stepping out onto the porch, the sun hit me like a physical blow. I blinked, trying to adjust. The backyard looked exactly as it always did. Green lawn, the shed at the back, my mom's flower beds along the fence, and the sprawling oak tree dominating everything. I walked slowly towards the tree, my eyes scanning the ground, the trunk, the lower branches. Nothing. No disturbed earth, no strange footprints, no broken branches. I even looked up into the canopy, my neck craning, trying to see if anything was nestled in the leaves. Just birds' nests and the usual summer insects. I felt a wave of crushing disappointment, mixed with a tiny, flickering spark of relief. Maybe I was just imagining things. Maybe I needed sleep, real sleep, without the constant vigilance. I circled the tree, shining my flashlight into every nook and cranny, even though it was bright as day. And then I saw it. On the trunk, just above eye level, where a large branch met the main body of the tree, there was a patch of bark that looked different. It wasn't discolored, not exactly, but it looked rougher, almost frayed, as if something had been repeatedly scraping against it. And beneath it, almost hidden by a scattering of dead leaves, was a small, dark stain. It was dried, almost black, but it had that same faint metallic tang. Old blood, or something that looked and smelled disturbingly like it. My breath hitched in my throat. This wasn't imagination. This was real, and it had been here, right outside my window, reaching. I backed away slowly, my eyes fixed on the stain, on the disturbed bark. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. What could do that? What kind of animal? Nothing I knew of. Not a raccoon, not a squirrel. This was deliberate, like something had been trying to climb, trying to gain purchase. I stumbled back into the house, slamming the door shut and locking it with a frantic click. The fragile sense of relief shattered, replaced by a cold, sharp terror. It wasn't just sounds. It wasn't just a smell. There was evidence, and that evidence pointed to something that was not only real, but persistent. Something that had been trying, night after night, to get to my window, to get to me. That night was the worst yet. I didn't even bother to lie down. I sat upright in my bed, back pressed against the headboard, a heavy baseball bat clutched in my trembling hands. My eyes were fixed on the window, watching the impenetrable darkness, waiting. And it came. The tapping started, but it was no longer hesitant. It was a frantic, desperate scrabbling, claws on glass, accompanied by a low, guttural scratching against the wall of my closet. The sounds merged, a terrifying symphony of violation. And through it all, I could hear a faint, ragged breathing. Not my own. Something else. Something heavy and wet, right outside my window. The smell was overpowering now, thick and sickly sweet. It felt like it was filling my lungs, suffocating me. I squeezed my eyes shut, pressing my hands over my ears. But the sounds, the smell, they were inside me now. I could feel them. It was trying to get in. And I knew, with a certainty that made my heart feel like a frozen stone in my chest, that it was only a matter of time. Days blurred into an endless cycle of exhaustion and terror. I stopped eating much, just picking at whatever I could find, my stomach a knot of nerves. My parents called again, sounding worried. I could tell they noticed the strained cheerfulness in my voice, the quick, clipped answers. They asked if I was getting enough sleep. I just mumbled something about late-night gaming. The lie felt flimsy, transparent. I knew they were planning to come home early, a few days before their original return date. The thought should have brought immense relief, but instead, it just added a new layer of panic. What if it escalated before they got here? What if it got inside? I started spending my days in the living room, downstairs, as far away from my bedroom window as possible. I'd turn on the TV, anything for background noise, but my mind was never truly engaged. Every creak of the house, every rustle of leaves outside, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. I'd constantly peer out the windows, checking the backyard, the street, the empty sky. My eyes were bloodshot, surrounded by dark circles that seemed to sink deeper with each passing hour. The police were not an option. What would I say? "Officer, there's something scratching at my wall and tapping on my window, and it smells like death, but there's no physical evidence except for a scraped tree and a tiny, dried stain?" They'd probably send a mental health worker, or worse, tell my parents I was having some kind of breakdown. I was on my own. One afternoon, a couple of days before my parents were due back, I was slumped on the couch, staring blankly at some daytime talk show. A sudden, sharp rap echoed through the house. Not from my bedroom, from the front door. My heart leaped into my throat. Who could it be? I wasn't expecting anyone. I froze, my body rigid, listening. Another rap, more insistent this time. I crept towards the door, peeking through the peephole.
It was old Mr. Henderson from next door, his usual kind, crinkled face looking a little concerned. He was holding a small, brightly colored flyer. "Alex, everything all right, son? Haven't seen you outside much lately. Just wanted to drop off this flyer for the neighborhood watch meeting." Relief washed over me, so potent it almost made my knees buckle. Just Mr. Henderson, a real person. I opened the door, forcing a weak smile. "Hey, Mr. Henderson. Yeah, everything's fine. Just been catching up on some sleep."
He peered at me, his eyes sharp. "You look a little peaked, Alex, and I could have sworn I heard some commotion from your backyard late last night. Sounded like something mighty upset out there." My blood ran cold again. He heard it. Someone else had heard it. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Commotion? Oh, probably just a stray cat or something. You know how they get." Mr. Henderson just hummed, a thoughtful sound. "Maybe, but it sounded bigger than a cat, son. Almost heavy, and a bit of a low growl, too, if I'm not mistaken." He paused, his gaze lingering on my face. "You make sure you keep those doors locked at night, okay? Never know what's lurking in the woods these days." He gave me a brief paternal nod, handed me the flyer, and then turned to walk back to his house. I closed the door slowly, the blood draining from my face. A low growl. He heard a low growl. It wasn't just sounds from inside the house or the tapping on my window. Whatever it was making noise outside, real noise, loud enough for a neighbor to hear. It was out there, and it wasn't just trying to get in, it was expressing frustration, anger. That night, the fear wasn't a hum anymore. It was a roar. I didn't even try to sleep. I dragged a heavy armchair from the living room and wedged it under my bedroom doorknob, just another pathetic barrier. I sat in the corner of my room, huddled, clutching the baseball bat, my eyes riveted on the window. The tapping started, a slow, deliberate cadence that promised more to come. Tap, tap, tap. Then it quickened, becoming a frenzied drumming against the glass, interspersed with that horrendous scratching at the wall. The smell was so thick now, it felt like I could taste it, acrid and metallic. It was right there. I could hear the wet, ragged breathing, closer than ever. I could almost feel its presence pressed against the other side of the glass. And then, a new sound, a low, raspy whisper. It wasn't distinct words, just a guttural, inhuman sound, a breathy moan that seemed to vibrate through the window pane and directly into my skull. It filled the room, a sound of pure malevolence, of something ancient and hungry. My body was shaking uncontrollably, every muscle screaming for me to run, to scream, to do anything but sit there and wait. But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by a terror so profound, it felt like my very soul was trying to tear itself free from my body. The sounds, the smell, the phantom breath on the glass, it was all culminating, building to an unbearable crescendo. I knew with sickening certainty that tonight was different. Tonight, it wasn't just trying to get in. Tonight, it was going to succeed. And my parents were still hours away. My vision tunneled. The room seemed to recede, and all I could focus on were the violent tremors shaking the window pane. The glass flexed inward, just a fraction of an inch, but it was enough to make a high-pitched, agonizing groan. It was like the window itself was screaming. I could hear splintering sounds from the old wood frame, faint at first, then louder, sharper. It wasn't just hitting the glass anymore. It was working on the frame, relentlessly. The whispered, guttural sound intensified, no longer just a breath, but a low, vibrating hum that made my teeth ache. It felt like a sound meant to shatter something inside me, to break my will.
And the smell, it was overwhelming. I felt a wave of nausea, my throat constricting, every breath a struggle against the stench of decay, and something else, something metallic and sickly that burned in my nostrils. Suddenly, a loud, cracking noise ripped through the air. A thin, spider-webbed crack appeared in the bottom corner of the window, spreading quickly, tendrils of destruction across the glass. My breath hitched. It was going to break through. It was really going to break through.
Panic, cold and absolute, finally cut through my paralysis. I screamed. It was a raw, choked sound tearing itself from my chest. I scrambled backwards, pressing myself into the corner of the room, my knuckles white on the baseball bat. My eyes were wide, fixed on the fracturing glass. I could see the outline of something large and dark pressed against the pane, a shape that vaguely resembled a hunched figure, but twisted, elongated, utterly wrong. There were no discernible features, just an oppressive, formless mass silhouetted against the deeper darkness outside. Another crack. A piece of glass, no bigger than my thumb, pinged off the pane and fell to the floor inside my room. I flinched, my whole body recoiling. And then, just as I braced for the final shatter, the phone rang. The shrill, unexpected sound ripped through the terrifying symphony of scratching and tapping. It rang once, twice, and the sounds outside, they hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. It rang a third time, the persistent mechanical sound slicing through the oppressive dread. And then, abruptly, the scratching stopped, the tapping ceased. The low, wet breathing outside my window vanished, replaced by an eerie, unnerving silence. The terrible smell lingered, but it seemed to thin, to recede, as if whatever had been there was pulling back. I stayed frozen in my corner, listening, my chest heaving. The phone stopped ringing. The silence that followed was almost as terrifying as the noise had been. It was an unnatural quiet, like the world was holding its breath. I kept my eyes on the window, terrified that it was just a trick, that it would resume its assault with renewed fury. But nothing happened. The broken pane remained, a jagged wound in the night, but whatever had been outside was gone. Slowly, carefully, I slid down to the floor, my muscles screaming in protest. I stayed there, huddled and shivering, until the first faint sliver of dawn began to paint the sky a weak gray. Only then, with the promise of sunlight, did I finally drag myself up. My parents arrived home later that morning, their faces etched with worry when they saw me. They asked me what happened, about the cracked window, about the dark circles under my eyes. I mumbled something about a branch in a storm, a nightmare. They looked at each other, concerned, but didn't push. They just held me, and for a moment, I almost felt safe. But I'm not safe. I haven't been since that night. I replaced the window myself, using a spare pane my dad had in the shed. I told them I wanted to help, to fix it. They thought I was being responsible. I was really just trying to erase the evidence, to pretend it hadn't happened. But it did happen. And sometimes, in the dead of night, when the house is silent and the darkness presses in, I still catch a faint whiff of that metallic, sickly sweet smell. And I listen to the silence, because I know it's just waiting, waiting for my parents to leave again, waiting for the right moment. And I can never truly sleep, not anymore. I just wait for the tapping to start again, or for a new sound, a different way in. It's out there, and it remembers me.